Na's watching with us right now. Hi, Na. How are you doing? She has a question about, have you been back to the theater since this incident? Were you at the reopening?
It actually took me a very long time to go back to that theater.
I bet.
Going back to the movies took years, but going back to that theater, I actually went to the opening night of the live action Aladdin, release of Aladdin that Disney did. And that was the first time I had been back to that theater since the shootings, which that was pretty recently, actually. So you would think, I think it was in 2020 or 2019. So that was, the shootings happened in 2012. So it took me that long to be able to go back to that theater. And actually, I had avoided that area for that entire time as well. I just wasn't comfortable being over there in that area. And this is not a bad part of town, right? I mean,
right? No, not at all.
It's Southeast Aurora. I mean, it's actually
and it's getting fancier, but every year it gets fancier. Seriously,
it up and right. And so, there was one police officer there that night that happened, but obviously no one's ever ready for that to happen in a theater. There was so 70 people were wounded, 12 individuals lost their lives, and the youngest victim, I believe, was 5 years old. She was a little girl. And it just was the craziest thing. It was the craziest thing. I would never wish that on anyone. And actually there were, that's near the Buckley Air Force Base. And so we did have some families there that had the parents that were military background. They did some tours, in other countries, and then come home, and then that happens. I mean, who in the world? I don't know. It's the craziest thing. But yeah, I talk about the experience in detail, and that's the first time during that TED Talk, Sarah, that I had ever actually described it in that much detail. Since the incident actually happened, I had to give my statement to the court, but then after that, I didn't even want to talk about it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I can only imagine. I mean, and I will first and foremost say what a blessing to have you here to share this message and to carry forward, this story of resiliency, coming through an incident like this. And I think that's just everything, when you were talking about, coming to an understanding of, there's some stuff that I need to process here. What would you say is where does the courage, right? There's some courage that it takes to be honest about where you're at and what you haven't looked at. And so what would you say is the process of coming to find the courage, and how people can find the courage to reflect honestly and say, hey, I need some help here?
I think the courage for me came from when I was at my lowest point, because I was tired, I realized. Most of the time, the one thing that was consistent every time I would have a falter, like waking up a detox or, being blackout drunk, to be 100% transparent with everybody, that's how bad my substance abuse issue was. I just was tired every time. Like once I would actually gain my recognizance back, I was just like, why am I doing this? And every time I would have an incident like that, I luckily had people that I could lean on to talk it out with them. Like my best friend Stephanie, I mentioned Carlos, my significant other, and my mom. But for people to have that type of a support system, people around us also have to be willing to be there for us and have to be willing to, work with that individual that might be struggling to formulate what's going to be their pillars, in essence. And the courage really came from my support system after I was, willing to, I guess you could say, do a recounting of events in my life and actually come to a realization like, yes, Joanna, all of this happened to you. Like
right.
This is not, yes, you survived it. Yes, you're doing well. But what is it doing to you internally? The courage, the simple answer is the courage came from when I was rock bottom and hit my lowest point. But it also came from the consistency of my support system every time something like that did happen where I was being self-destructive, and they were always there for me in some capacity. So the important thing about my TED Talk is you can't do it alone,
Right.
And I had to come to that realization through struggles that I had with, or disagreements or arguments that I had with my support system. It was a rocky road. I had some arguments and fights with my significant other. We broke up a couple of times, and a lot of times I had to set myself down and have that conversation with myself, like, you have to take responsibility for your part in this, right? If I was blackout drunk, who was forcing me to drink? I mean, it really came from
encouraging you. Yeah.
It really had to come from me having that internal conversation with myself. But then I had to admit that I needed the help. And I did that through just opening up the communication, regardless of shame, regardless of judgment. And the pinnacle points would happen when I had a falter or, some type of misjudgment on, or made a wrong decision or something like that. And I had to admit it. I had to admit, like, what my part in it was. Like, yeah, Joanna, you probably should have just stopped, or you probably could have just, went home. And it came for me through that self-reflective time, but also just being tired. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to hurt the people that I love because I haven't dealt with everything that I've been through. And that's essentially what was happening. Yeah.
It's interesting that, it's when we might have to hit our lowest point in order for us to recognize that, I'm struggling, and being able to come to the truth of that. And I would also say, that's oftentimes the experience for most of us, is like, we got to be down hard and downtrodden before we get there. But it doesn't have to be that way. I think, if for anybody out there who is, listening to this, who is maybe coming to terms with the fact that maybe, like, some of the things that you talked about, Joanna, the busying yourself, the diving into stuff, the striving towards distraction, the staying busy, and avoiding. And and that literally gets to the point of exhaustion where you just can't anymore. And if you're a person who's sitting out there and you are exhausted, you might look into that exhaustion before you tap out and recognize, hey, maybe what I am dealing with right now is something I need to face, and maybe I need to look for some help or some support. When you're talking about your pillars, Joanna, which you mentioned your mom, you mentioned your best friend, Carlos, of course, who's gone through this with you, and amazing that the two of you are still together, having gone through this together all these years. And it's what I would say, is it that your support, how you figured who your support was, is that these are the people who showed up for you without question? And then and then the second part of that question would be for someone who maybe feels like they don't have support or they're not feeling support. Do you have any advice or what you would say to them as far as finding support for themselves?
Mm-hmm. So that's a very important part, and thank you for bringing that up. But these people in my life that I use as examples for my pillars, they are the main support system for me. They have been for many years, consistently, and so that's why I wanted to showcase them as an example of my 3 pillars. But as I mentioned before, I also had to come to an agreement that I was going to do those things for myself as well and live my life by those 3 pillars. And I can honestly say that if you're feeling like you don't have those key people in your life, which some of us might not, one of the things that I always encourage in my mental health background was to look into resources that are around you and in your community. There are support groups that are available that you don't have to meet in person for. Well, and that's happening more on a larger scale in the pandemic now anyway. Yeah. But, and there's a part there too that I want to say, Sarah, like it's a 2-part, almost a 3-part of my TED Talk, because I always, at the end I say, let's ask each other how we're doing and mean it. Knowing that each one of us has been through trauma in some capacity, if all of us can have that in mind and really take from the 3 pillars that I presented or develop 3 pillars that work for you, if all of us are willing to be there for somebody, then there's somebody there for everybody, right? And so that might come in many different facets of life. It might be somebody that you work with. Like I was mentioning to you, I embody the 3 pillars that I presented in all aspects of life, even in my professional life. I think it's very important that you look into resources within where you're employed, because a lot of employers are now offering the, employee assistance programs, maybe, where you get free therapy sessions, because that's definitely something that, if it's available at your workplace, and here's the thing, you could have been dealing with trauma a long time ago, like me, and then you just can't kick something gets you worked up or something triggers you, and you can't figure out quite what's going on, and so then you can need some therapy for that. You can also have maybe you think you haven't dealt with trauma, but you get stressed easily in everyday life. Therapy is there for that. I was in therapy for something other than the Aurora Theater shootings, and then I worked in the mental health field and learned about all of the mental health resources also throughout our communities here in Colorado. Actually, Colorado is one of the best states to live in if you need help. Our suicide hotline is great. It's a great resource. 211, you can always call there and ask them for what programs they have available free of charge as well within the community. Your county has programs for you. And here's the thing, because I've known some people that I've helped in the mental health field that were in the foster care system, or they don't have resources financially. There's still things that you can tap into in your community and reach out for help. You can call into that the county, and you don't have to give them any information about yourself. If you just want information about what resources are available, you could just call in and tell them that you just want to know what are the phone numbers that I can call to get more information? What are the websites I can visit? And so those are some of the things that you can do to try to find help in some capacity if you don't have an actual support system yet. and you're building them from the ground up. And if you've decided that is, because you have to decide for yourself, right? They're like that. I want to build this for me. It starts with us. It starts with the individual.
Yeah.
We have to decide, okay, I want to be that person that is a pillar, if that's something that, because a lot of us struggle with that too. And we might think it's a lot of work, which is fair. It could be. Somebody's trauma, like you and I were talking about before, might not be the magnitude of something that maybe you've experienced. But, if we as a society and in all of our communities can decide that we want to be a pillar for somebody, ask each other how we're doing and be genuine about it, be authentic. Maybe some of these people that don't have a person support system, they might have more to tap into if people are more receptive and open to being there for one another.
Yeah.
Even if it's something like this, Sarah, I mean, this is great. Like a chat type of platform.
Opening the conversation.
Open up the conversation. Have the uncomfortable conversation. And listen without judgment. Like, really hear them out. Don't tell them what to do. That's something else that really helped me. Is instead of someone telling me it's going to be okay, I had people that were telling me, this really sucks. I'm so sorry. Take the time to be upset. That's really important too. And so, yeah.